morning to everyone, and thank you for joining us on this auspicious occasion to celebrate 75 years of our independence. It is an occasion for the 1.4 billion of us to reminisce our country's culture, heritage, and history, and look back on how far we as a nation have come from the dark days of colonial oppression to emerge strongly and stand tall and proud as a nation with our eyes firmly set on a bright future. There is much to say about our country's glorious past, which cannot be covered in a span of an hour. Therefore, today's session will be focused on one particular chapter of history that we and our future generations of space voyagers will consider as the starting point of our journey, of our nation's marvelous journey into infinity and beyond. I vividly remember reading the passage on Wing Commander Rakesh Sharma in my science textbook on his monumental journey into space aboard the Soyuz T-11 in my science textbook with my eyes filled with wonder and amusement. That wonder has continued as I became an adult, as it did with all the people of our nation. It is therefore a matter of pride and honor and privilege for us to host Wing Commander Rakesh Sharma, former Air Force fighter pilot, former test pilot at the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, and of course, the first Indian to travel space and to see from above that our nation is truly Saare Jahaan se Achcha. Thank you very much, sir, for gracing us with your presence, and we wish you a very happy Independence Day.
Thank you, Rachna. Thank you for your kind words, and I will wish to convey the same to the audience who is following this program today.
Thank you very much, sir. With your permission, we would like to now commence the session.
Please, please.
So I would like to start from the very beginning, sir. You have mentioned that you have always had the passion of being a pilot and to fly and to be in the sky since you were a child. I would like to know what is it that made you gravitate towards this particular domain of being a test pilot?
Well, I think it was a natural progression. When I was a kid, of course, at that time, for the very first time in our skies, we saw a jet aircraft making a whistling sound, which was that the way Vampire had come to the Indian Air Force, had got its first jet trainer. So that used to keep flying around in the skies, and I got hooked onto it. It was wondrous to see instead of a propeller-driven aircraft and the characteristic sound that the propeller makes, it was replaced by this whistling sound, that of a jet engine. So, and then I had a cousin who joined the Air Force, and he took me and made me sit in the aircraft. And when I saw those arrays of instruments, and I was barely 5 or 6 years old, somehow that picture stayed with me, and I decided then that I'm going to be up in the air in an aircraft like that when I grow up, and that kind of stayed with me, much to my mom's disappointment, who didn't want me to expose myself to that kind of danger. She thought I will grow out of it. I didn't. So I did join the Air Force, and I was fortunate to have been selected for the fighter stream. After having done that, you know, I took part in the 1971 war, and I was very lucky to have flown the MiG-21 very early, and then, like I said, the next step was to increase the degree of difficulty. So one opted for test flying, and so that's how I landed up being a test pilot, which has it's a separate bag of excitement to test aeroplanes because you don't know what to expect, and so it's fun to kind of be prepared for the unexpected and be a step ahead. So that was interesting in that phase. And all of that conspired, and I was very fortunate that when the call came and they were looking for aspirants for the space flight, they wanted, folks who were young, who were fit, who were test pilots, and I was all of those. And I was really lucky to have got selected.
It was fascinating to hear, sir. It's one thing to have a dream and another to chase it and to achieve it and to reach such heights. It's very inspiring to hear. So, as you mentioned, you had the opportunity to fight in the 1971 Bangladesh War and fly MiG-21s. So this was not much time after you got drafted into the Air Force. So, as a young and relatively inexperienced pilot, how was it like to fly in such a hostile and tense environment?
Yeah, it took some doing. I can't, I won't say that I was thrown in the deep end and that I was given missions which were more suited for more experienced and senior pilots. But I did happen to fly 21 missions, mostly of the air defense kind, to protect our own airfield, to protect the border areas, to look out for intruders, because the MiG 21 is an air defense aircraft, an interceptor. It's just that at that time, Pakistan was fighting a limited war. They were unsure how long the war would last. So they weren't, they were very circumspect to engage because, mm, they, like I said, they weren't sure how long the war is going to last and how long their munitions will last. So they didn't want to expend everything, whereas we went at it hammer and tongs. So we had achieved a favorable air situation pretty early. So as a result, I don't have any valorous stories to share about my own role in that war, except for the fact that I was lucky to have taken part in it.
As much as you say that it wasn't valorous for a civilian like us who are protected by heroes like you, going into the heat of battle and protecting our nation is as valorous as it gets for us. So, of course, a few years after this, you had the opportunity to fly for the monumental space mission that everyone wants to hear about. So, we'd like to know how exactly did this particular manned mission collaboration came about between India and the then Soviet Union, and what really prompted you to volunteer for this mission?
The background, I think, for this mission was the content was science, but uh, the aims were geopolitical in the sense that the Soviet Union wanted to show to the rest of the world. They, of course, were in that ideological race between capitalism and communism. And the Soviet Union wanted to show to the rest of the world that India is one of its satellites. So they had offered this space flight to India. And India, Mrs. Gandhi at that time offered it to ISRO. ISRO was busy in its satellite program, and they didn't at that time have the bandwidth and didn't want, they wanted to remain focused on that particular program, which, as you know, they have executed brilliantly. Um, so when Mrs. Gandhi did not respond positively, the Soviet Union, after a gap, once again uh, told her that, this is a chance they must take, etc. And then she asked the Air Force, and the Air Force, Indian Air Force, jumped at that opportunity. And that's how it all started. And the rest, like I said, then the selection process began, and I was, they were looking for from amongst test pilots, and I was young, I was qualified, I was fit, I was there at the right time, at the right place, and it all happened, came together.
Right, sir. So, we'd like to know how exactly were you and your fellow test pilots tested for this mission? What sort of parameters were you tested on, and what sort of procedures did you have to go through to be selected?
Well, every test known to medical science at that point in time, we were put through the grind, and there were some tests where we didn't have the requisite equipment. So those of us who came through this battery of tests and who made it, we were shortlisted, and some four of us then had to go to Moscow because they had all the equipment at the space center. So some more medical tests were carried out there. So 4 became 2, and then 2 of us got selected. Uh, Myself and my colleague and my senior, Ravish Malhotra,
Mhm.
both of us were selected. And then we went back for the training at the Yuri Gagarin Space City, Star City. We trained there for 18 months or so for this flight.
Well, this is amazing to hear. So there is obviously the curiosity in me to know more. So how was it like to train in Russia, a new land, new place, new people, a new language? Was their way of doing things different from how it was back here in India? And how was the experience like?
Yeah, it was very different because firstly, it was a closed society. The perestroika had not yet happened, so and everybody was very suspicious of everybody else. So everything was on a need to know basis.
Mm.
So was the instruction. The instructions which were imparted, the science behind space flight, uh, we didn't come away with our technical curiosities satisfied, but we were told enough to ensure that the flight itself would be safe. So we won't be hazards in the vehicle. So we knew what we were doing, and what would be the cause and the effect of all our actions. So that was the focus of the training. As regards language, yes, that was a toughie. It was a new language, and the entire training was in that language. So that's where the fact that we were test pilots helped us, because essentially spaceflight is really an extension of military aviation.
Mm.
Uh, and therefore, conceptually, most systems and designs, the design of those systems were kind of replicated,
Mm.
from aircraft onto spacecraft, with some necessary changes due to the environment in which it would be operating the system. So that wasn't the technical part wasn't the tough part. It was just the language, because the entire, shall we say, communication with mission control, all of that was in Russian. Intercommunication with the crew was in Russian. So that was the difficult part, and that was challenging.
Right. I can only imagine how challenging it is to learn a new language and put it into practice in such a critical and difficult mission. I can only imagine. I couldn't imagine learning a new language at this point, but it's quite inspiring to know that you managed to do it. So, what exactly was the training procedure like for this mission, sir? What sort of acclimatization procedures did you go through to get used to the zero gravity and entering and re-entering the atmosphere? What was it like, sir?
Well, it was, if you look back, basically, what do you train for? You train so that you remain productive in the environment you're going to be operating in. So the idea was to know, and these guys had been in the business from the times of Yuri Gagarin, so the Russians knew how to prepare the space crews, both theoretically, and how the body has to be prepared to adapt to that kind of an environment. So lack of zero gravity, uh, there were some tests which we used to do, so that you condition your vestibular system, which helps you balance, um, so that it does not kind of overreact and cause problems of space sickness when you are in that environment. Because in zero gravity, you cannot maintain your vertical posture as we do on Earth. So you're forever moving around, and your head moves around. There is no floor, there is no roof, and it doesn't make sense to try and even balance. You don't, because you're not going to fall. so so that's what happens. So you go to train for that environment by conditioning your vestibular system, so that when it faces that environment, and when it gets overactive, it does not set up a situation where you start feeling sick because of that. So you condition your. Similarly, the cardiovascular system, with the lack of gravity, there's too much blood which keeps rushing to the head. These are the changes in the human body which happens. But our human body is such a wonderfully designed system that it quickly adapts and accommodates these changes, and your heart rate slows down, and you come to a new normal, which ensures that you remain functional. So these were the changes that happened, and these were the training was done for these changes to adapt easily to this kind of environment.
So, sir, in those days, what sort of devices were used to put you through such tests and to acclimatize you?
Well, talking about the vestibular system, we were made to sit in a revolving chair, uh, all strapped up, and the chair would rotate around its axis. And while the chair was rotating, we were required to move our head from side to side, forward and back, and left to right. Because when we did that, then in turn, we were activating the mutually perpendicular semicircular canals, which are there in the middle ear, which are filled with the fluid. So, and that is what kind of, makes you feel sick, which is what travel sickness is all about. Because your sensation then does not match up with your visual sense. So that is what sets up the dissonance, and you start feeling sick. So we did a lot of work on that chair. Uh, and what that did was that it kind of deconditioned, made it less sensitive, our vestibular system. So therefore it adapted easily to this extra head movements in zero gravity. So that was one of the things. Then there were a lot of weight training required. They checked our speed, our endurance, our strength, mm, when we reached there. And then they had a regimen to build each of those parameter up. Uh, they used Olympic trainers to do this from their Olympic team. So that was well, for somebody who was fond of outdoors and fond of the gym, etc. That was just it was a kind of a cakewalk and fun. So so that didn't bother us much. So things like this, the isolation, for example, that was one of the tests. They wanted to see if you had latent claustrophobic tendencies.
Hmm.
So they used to lock you up in a chamber for 72 hours without any books, without any papers, without any television, without any timepiece. So you were just left with your thoughts, trapped in that without any windows. So you have no outside inputs coming in. So you are just so stuff like this.
I just listening to all this, I could tell from just by sitting here how taxing it must have been on your mind and body.
No, well, I'll tell you one thing that if you have to do this over and over and over again, I guess it would be. But there was that novelty aspect. So
Hmm.
yeah, so that helped us. So one was curious and experiencing it for the very first time. Quite frankly, uh, it was interesting more than taxing.
Right, right. It feels taxing to someone like me, sir. So even then, your training must have been very rigorous. You were away from family, so did you
No, the
feel like
family.
giving up?
No, 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 no. The family
Oh, you
was
were
with
in such.
us.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's great to hear, sir. Sorry about
they
that.
were living. Yeah, the
Oh,
family
right,
was
right.
with us. Yeah,
Oh, right,
but
right.
but yes, we used to leave when it was dark. We used to return when it was dark. We were supposed to have all our meals uh, at Star City. So yes, so only it was only on the weekends that we really had time to bond with the family.
Right. So, things ever get extremely tough for you? Did you ever feel like giving up? And in those moments, what was it that kept you going?
I won't say one felt like giving up. It never got that tough.
Mm,
It's only if one was not doing well or struggling. The only struggle really was the language,
mm,
because you wanted to interact more, being with our background, technical background. We always wanted to learn more. Like I said, just to satisfy our the technical curiosity. But that was not forthcoming, so that was frustrating more than anything else. And one doesn't want to give up just because of frustration. We were there, we were chosen, we had a job to do, and in any case, it was going to be the experience of a lifetime. So you don't chuck it all up just because you're frustrated.
right. Right. Of course, sir. So, of course, you must have been ecstatic, but still, we'd like to know how did you react when you found out you had made the cut and you would be the one going to space? And how did your family and friends react to this news?
Well, I don't know about family and friends because we were in Moscow when the announcement was made. And uh, so it was it was wonderment, in the sense both of us knew that one of us will be going. So in that sense, it's like, how do you feel when you toss a coin and it comes out heads and you've called heads? How do you feel? You say, well, I'm lucky. That's how you feel. So that's exactly how I felt. And then immediately you start thinking of what all you need to do. You want to you rededicate yourselves. You tighten the belt. You don't want to screw up. There are responsibilities riding on your shoulder. So you get immersed in that.
Yes, sir. I think this is a good reminder for us to not get too caught up in our successes and to keep our head down, remain focused, and do what is needed.
Yeah. Well, because you got to deliver. I mean, if
Right.
you don't deliver, you're only hurting your own chances. uh, because any kind of distraction can only lower your output.
Right.
So therefore, you'll be doing yourself a favor and leveling the field for yourself if you do not allow yourself to be carried away by the gravity of the moment.
Right. That was very thought-provoking, sir. So finally, you were aboard the Soyuz T-11, and you left the Earth's atmosphere. You were in space, and you were on the Salyut space station. So one thing, of course, burning curiosity for us is what was it like to be on that space station, and what did a day on that space station look like for you?
It was chock-a-block full of activity because this whole game is so expensive that you must utilize every work second for productive work. So therefore, we lived by the clock because there was no other way. There is no other way to live when you're in near Earth orbit, uh, and the reason for that is that you see a sunrise every 90 minutes. You see a sunset every 90 minutes. So so you can't work as per that. So you work as per the clock, and so it's a normal work day. You get up, ablutions, and then have your breakfast, and then start preparing for the experiments that you have to do, setting it up, carrying out the experiments, recording the results, and then stowing things back, preparing for the next experiment in between, perhaps, uh, you know, mm, having interviews with the media and stuff. So pretty packed day, and we didn't know how those 8 days flew, and then we were ready to return back. So it's a great place to visit. It's a tough place to work in, So that's how it was.
Sounds magical, sir. So I'm sure your training prepared you for all sorts of eventualities that come with a space flight mission. But even then, was there anything that surprised you or shocked you or went against your expectations from space flight? Was there anything like that?
Well, not uh, if you're alluding to the fact whether there were any hair-raising incidents which kind of made us nervous about the safety of the flight. No, I don't think so. There weren't any, except on the return when the parachute opened, one was unprepared for the kind of noise which was inside the capsule because of the buffeting of the parachute. And since it was my first flight, I was quite convinced that this parachute is not going to hold because the noise was quite deafening inside. And I thought it's going to part company with the capsule. Uh, and that then obviously we would be in trouble. We would become a projectile instead of a soft landing. We'd probably dig a crater for ourselves. But that didn't happen. And things quietened down within about 30 to 45 seconds, within a minute, and the tossing and bobbing around stopped, and we came down quite serenely after that, suspended under the parachute. The whole capsule was suspended under the parachute. So, but for this, things were fairly routine.
One incident that I heard from one of your interviews was that you saw a forest fire happening in then Burma, and then you alerted the authorities to it, and the fire was successfully stopped because you observed it from above in space. So, could you tell us about that? And were there any other such incidents that happened?
Well, yeah. So actually, most of the northern latitudes was under cloud cover, so we couldn't see. Our orbit was inclined about 57 degrees to the equator, and therefore, we used to approach from the southwest to the northeast, and uh, every orbit, which took 90 minutes, the Earth rotates on its own axis. So the next orbit is west of the previous track. So on one of these orbits, when one looked outside the window on the right, one could see the coastline of India, and one could see now Myanmar and the tropical forest. There was smoke rising from there, and because of the upper winds, the plume of smoke was heading towards Indonesia. So obviously, it appeared to be a biggish fire, and which I reported. But knowing at that time, of course, environment wasn't such a big deal. Uh,
Hmm.
it's only today that one realizes that perhaps there was that part of the forest which was being cleared for its wood or whatever, and the best way would probably be to for the foliage to be burnt out so that they have access to those trees. I don't know whether that was man-made or whether it was accidental. I really don't know. My job ended after I reported it. I don't know what happened after that.
Right. Sounds sounds really does sound hair raising this moment. So, do you take away any souvenir or keepsake from your flight up there to take back home and to remind you of your journey?
Well, no, it would have been different had we landed on the moon. I guess one could have picked up a
Right.
fistful of soil or a rock or something. But here we never got out of the spacecraft. So
Mm,
what we took up is what we got back. And
mm,
there were some first day covers which were cancelled in space. So those were the keepsakes. And there was some music cassettes which I had taken up at that time to listen to while working. Brought those back. That's about it. Yeah, and a whole heap of memories, of course, which I like to share, like I'm doing now with you guys.
It's wonderful to hear, sir. So, after you landed back down on Earth, what was the entire atmosphere like around you after your very momentous journey to space? And did you observe any change in the general public about, especially in India, about their awareness towards space and space technology after your much publicized space flight?
Well, yeah, I mean, just as it's all tied to the way television grew in India.
Mm.
At the time of my flight, there was only one channel, Doordarshan, and Doordarshan at that time, the only content they had was to cover politicians giving their speeches. So this was a good distraction. As a result, there was wall-to-wall coverage of the space flight, and just as nowadays conflict and war globally has entered into our drawing rooms, spaceflight as a subject entered into Indian drawing rooms. Those drawing rooms which had televisions, because televisions were, I mean, like we never had a TV at that time. When I went up into space, I didn't have a TV at home. So really speaking, people did get to know. But when I returned, that was an extremely I would call it destabilizing, because one never expected the level, the reactions one received, and we are a culture. We look at the sky and we think that somebody lives up there. So they thought that here is an emissary who's kind of come from there. At least the senior citizens, would there were people would want to touch you, people would want to grab you, maybe take a souvenir, pull at your clothes, and I mean it took some getting used to. So it did create a tremendous impact. Well, the subject is such, shall we say, and to have one of your own to come back and be in front of you, I I don't blame the public. It's just that one was unprepared for all this.
Right, right. Of course, it's a very must have been a very new experience for you.
Yeah.
Were you asked any strange questions by the media or by the general
No, I
public
was
about this?
no, I was asked some very difficult questions. The most difficult being, so how was it? So, so, so one used to always say, now you'll have to be a bit more specific than that. So yes, they were. One had to constantly see. The other problem is that I'm one of those guys who doesn't like to repeat himself.
Mm,
So, so so if you want to know whether there is some very intelligent questions asked by the media, the answer is no.
right, right. So, after your space odyssey, you went back to being a test pilot. But had India had a full-fledged manned mission program, or had we been having such regular collaborations with other countries, would you have chosen to be an astronaut, or would you have still chosen to be a test pilot? What would have been your choice?
No, I would have chosen to be an astronaut, certainly, because my appetite was whetted, and naturally one wanted to do more in that domain. I would certainly have been a career astronaut then, yes. But then
That's
you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. I got a chance to go there. I'm happy with that. Yeah.
of course, sir. So, shortly after this, at the age of 38, if I'm not wrong, you retired from the Air Force and you joined Hindustan Aeronautics Limited as a test pilot. So, what was the reason behind this decision?
The reason was that the Tejas, the light combat aircraft,
Mm,
was being developed, and as a test pilot, I wanted to fly that aeroplane. Except that it took so long to get ready
mm,
that I had already crossed. I had become too old. I had outlived that aeroplane, so I couldn't get to fly it. So that's why I wanted to continue with my test flying career, because there was something more challenging on the horizon at that time, and that's
right,
why I left the Air Force.
right. So, in simple terms, could you explain to us what exactly goes behind the process of testing such flights and what it takes to be a test pilot?
Well, there used to be at that time two types of test pilots. One was a production test pilot, and the other was an experimental test pilot. Now, a production test pilot is qualified to test copies of a proven design. So it is like if the MiG 21, which is a late 50s design, it has proved itself to be a safe aeroplane. And then India starts manufacturing it. So you get the technology, you get the blueprints, and you follow that and you make that aeroplane. So it's a proven design, and you just have to make sure that every copy which comes off the production line behaves and flies exactly like the previous one. So that is a production test pilot. Whereas an experimental test pilot is somebody who's qualified to test an aircraft or a design which is coming off the drawing board and which has never uh, taken to the skies. So only an experimental test pilot is qualified to fly those kind of missions for the very first time. So that is what I was venturing to do with the light combat aircraft, which eventually uh, didn't didn't work out, and I've given you the reason. And that's so that's the sum and substance of what test flying is all about. So in our Air Force, time and again, you get new aircraft, you get new weapons which you want to marry to old aircraft. You don't keep junking aircraft. It's not like a car. Aircraft cost 300 crores a piece, 400 crores a piece. So you can't keep junking them. So you want to extract them. The life cycle cost it becomes cheaper the longer you use it. You do retrofits. You marry newer weapon systems to older aircraft. So all of that testing is done by test pilots before the combination is released for use of squadron pilots in the Air Force.
Sounds very intriguing, sir. So now looking at the future, ISRO has its Gaganyaan mission coming up that we are all very eagerly anticipating. Recently, the low escape altitude motor has also been successfully tested. So looking at all this, what would you like to see in the future of the Indian manned space mission program?
What I'd like to see, uh, I'd like to see a lot more cooperation and a lot less competition. That's what I'd like to see. Because I think if each country tries to rediscover the same wheel, it's really not good for the planet from a resource utilization standpoint. And I do believe that where we are headed, this is the first time that humanity is leaving planet Earth and going to set up shop and colonize the moon first and then Mars. That competing doesn't make sense, because the job is so complex uh, that it makes sense because different countries have different skill sets. For example, innovation usually comes out of America. Reliability, I'm talking of space, comes out of Russia. Um Applications come out of India, China. So why not synergize our efforts and combine? Uh, and while at the same time, I think we've made a mess of resource utilization on planet Earth. So we need to make sure that there is some convergence of ideas, some proper policing so that we don't go and destroy the moon. So since we've not done a great job here in terms of sustainable development, I think we do need people to be on the same page, all the explorers who in future are going to explore the moon and Mars later, to to understand that we can't keep hopping from planet to planet and leaving it behind in ruins, you see. So that's what I would like to see. And I must say that ISRO has never got caught in this competitive business, ideological or scientific or otherwise. ISRO has, I think, utilized space for the benefit of society, and it has done extremely well. And if we continue down that path, I think all of us are we will all stand to gain. Otherwise we'll end up we'll be exporting conflict out of planet Earth into outer space, and we will continue confronting each other because we are not going there as tourists. We are going there to set up shop to mine riches, whether it's on asteroids or whether it is helium from the moon. And if you're going to carve out boundaries like we have done on Earth and say this is mine and that is yours, well, that is the seed of conflict. So we will be exporting conflict. So this is what I expect from ISRO, and this is what I hope that the future of space exploration will be, that it will be inclusive rather than exclusive.
Very well spoken, sir. I hope all of humanity takes your advice to heart and chooses to collaborate and evolve beyond all these boundaries. So one thing, of course, students would like to know from you is a particular roadmap or guidance you would like to give to those who want to become a part of the Air Force or even become an astronaut or cosmonaut or gaganaut, as Indian space voyages might be called. So we'd like your advice on that.
My life learning is that if you are not passionate about something, don't go that route. Okay. When we were young, there was this huge movement towards being doctors or engineers. It's just that I was lucky that I got hooked onto flying, and that turned into my passion. And that is why I found everything relatively easy. I'm not saying that I lay down in a hammock and things kept falling into my lap. No, everybody works hard. But if you're passionate about what you are working at, you are more likely to succeed and you are less likely to get jaded and feel spent while doing that job. Therefore, if you want to make your career in space, be very, very clear that you're passionate about it because it's not easy. Okay. So, therefore, and there is going to be a lot of work in the sense that when you are setting up a new colony, look at the various skills that would be required. Environmental engineers, biogenesis, you're going to grow your own food out there, you're going to build habitats out there. Look at the skill sets which are required. And all of that, you will need to work in an environment which is alien. So are you comfortable? Are you adaptable to difficult environments? So, I mean, these are questions you need to ask yourselves before you want to jump into this line. That's all I can say.
That was some pretty good advice, sir. I think it really showed the way for those of us who are aspiring to do well in such careers like you. So my final question to wrap this session up is that, of course, everyone knows of the moment with your interview with then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, where you said India looked like Saare Jahaan se Achcha from above. So, but even then, we'd like you to elaborate on what Bharat truly means to you. And what would you like to see it accomplish in the next 75 years of independence?
Oh, that's a deep question. See, I can answer it on two levels. One is how Bharat really looks from space. It's outstanding, really. And the reason for that is that there is nothing that our country doesn't have, visually speaking. It has got a long coastline. It has got greenery, ghat sections, it has got plateaus, it has got deserts, it has got tropical rainforests, it has got mountains, it's got rivers, and all of that looks absolutely brilliant from space. Different colors, different textures, and and all of it compressed. It takes about 6 to 7 minutes to traverse all of India. So looks wise, that's what it is. Now coming down to the idea of India, what India has been and what it is. Indeed, it is ours is an inclusive culture, and nobody has been able to move us out of that zone up till now, despite the various ups and downs we've had over a period of time. And really speaking, that's the only way to we are today, whether it's technology or otherwise, we are so interconnected that we have become interdependent because of the interconnection. And therefore, we have to have an inclusive outlook and not an exclusive outlook. And this is what India has been practicing all this while. And I do believe that if anybody has to learn anything of a better way of living, then India can be the leader in that. And in the next 75 years, that is exactly what I hope we will be doing. Whatever knowledge we have, we can share with other people so that we are defusing. I call it a peace offensive, otherwise, because everybody else is clamoring to be one up. And here it is, and we are seeing this around the world. All the billionaires are all turning philanthropists because everybody knows that's not the route one should follow. If you're interconnected and if you're interdependent, then you've got to make sure that we are all in this together.
Right, that was very moving and very inspiring, sir. I hope all of us as citizens take this to heart and make this our motto as we go on to become the people who will shape our country's future. So, on behalf of everyone at BITS Embryo, I would like to thank you very much for taking the time to have this extremely amazing and insightful session with us. And I'm sure all of our students have learned so much about your journey and your space flight and have gained much insight from it. Your life story is that of courage, excellence, and tenacity, and it will always inspire us to dream big and achieve even bigger. Thank you very much for gracing us on this occasion, and we wish you and our audience once again a very happy 76th Independence Day. We will be back with our next session tomorrow. Do stay tuned for that. And thank you, sir, for joining us. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, Jai Hind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.